It's chaos.
It's a different type of Sunday scary.
It's your newest obsession.
It's Dirty Driving, a Formula One podcast.
We're the Hornsby sisters. I'm Katie.
And I'm Megan.
Hello, hello.
Hello, everyone. It is noon on Saturday. It is less than 36 hours since the release of Drive to Survive, and the three of us have completed the season.
And that was a lot of effort.
And holy mac and cheese balls, to quote the great Daniel Ricciardo, we have a ton to talk about. And we're so lucky to be joined by our Formula-interested American friend, Connor Hayes.
Hey, everyone.
And we are just going to talk about the episodes, what we thought, and really jump right in. So Megan and I have been talking a little bit. We've been cheating, and I keep telling her, like, no, we got to stop talking about it. So, Connor, give us, like, your overall overview of what you thought just in general.
Overall, I consumed way too much Formula One yesterday between watching this and watching practice at the exact same time. I was a little burnt out by the end of the day, but it's good. I mean, this got me really hyped and ready for the season. I think that it could have maybe... I have some concerns. I have some complaints that we'll dive into as we go through this. But overall, it was good to kind of like get that refresher and get myself ready to go for the season. But I'm hoping that, you know, like F1 has been insinuating, they make a couple of changes. And we'll dive into that in a couple of the episodes.
I think I co-sign a lot of what you just said.
Yes. Agreement. That's what people want to hear.
I mean, I might disagree on the parts that I didn't like, but I co-signed that there needs to potentially be some changes.
Yeah, so I think we should just hop into the first episode. And my first tears came pretty quick. I cried a couple times, but when Sergio said, if you can't believe it, I've been in F1 for 10 years, and this is the first time a top team has given me the opportunity. And so that was my first, like, emotional moment where I felt like we were back. And, we were just, like, in it, to be honest.
But didn't he go to McLaren back when they were, like, actually good at one point?
Yeah, he was there for, a season?
He was there for a year, and admittedly, it was a bad year for McLaren, but at the time, they were still a really good team and considered one of the top three. So I'm going to say, Sergio, bullshit.
Okay, so when he said that, I was like, that's a little much. And who fed you that line at Red Bull? Like who slipped you a piece of paper like, Sergio, say this one? But
yeah. Okay,
the moment we have to start with, and like this is the first like audible guffaw, what, Christian? Because I had a lot of those, was when in testing, so they're in Bahrain testing, which I don't know, a lot of feelings because we're in Bahrain testing now. The glee in Christian Horner's voice when he was talking about Valtteri bitching and moaning.
I forget, like, how many behind the scenes, like, quips and comments we get to see that, like, maybe honestly should not be included in Drive to Survive. Like, obviously that's what we're there for, but sometimes I'm like, ouch, that was harsh, or I couldn't believe, like, my team principal saying that about me, or...
There are definitely times that I wonder... Is this something that they would legitimately say if there wasn't a camera here? Or are they saying this because they know, oh, shit, this is going to be great entertainment?
This was the first season where I thought that multiple times. And it wasn't about everybody. Like the Gunther Steiner moment in episode 1 where he was talking to Mick and Nikita and was like, okay, first of all, don't run into each other. Don't run into each other, learn, get through, like this is a learning experience. I felt like that entire conversation felt very genuine, But then there were so many other points with both Christian and Toto in that episode where I was like, is this real? Like, what is this how they actually talk when the cameras aren't on?
The biggest fraudster to me when it comes to this thing is Horner. He's a very, I don't know, made for TV kind of guy. It feels like, right? Like, he's got this big persona, he's got this big attitude, and obviously, like, he's married to a Spice Girl. Like, the guy is entertainment through and through, and this is the perfect thing for him to be involved with is Drive to Survive. But there's a lot of it that you go, he thought about this. He thought about this before it came out, and he knew that camera over there is going to get this, and people are going to love it.
I mean, no, go.
Go ahead, Megan. Okay. I was just going to say, I can't remember when it is, but Toto says something like, or let's limit the press today. I think it's like later on in the season. Let's limit press today. Christian can handle it. He loves to do it. So it's just a part of who he is. Like, the fact that he answers questions mid-race also is like wild to me.
I also, like, totally different, you know, we know my feelings on Mr. Media, but it was weird watching the Bahrain Grand Prix through the lens of Drive to Survive. I don't remember that race being so frustrating. And also, that entire episode, now watching it back, I was like, how did none of us realize that 2021 was going to be as dramatic after testing and that first Grand Prix? Like, we should have been prepared. Like, we should have mentally known what was to come.
What was really interesting about the first race, I thought that this episode was strong, but my biggest frustration was the race itself and the coverage of the race, because there were two stories that they could have told throughout this season that were really, in my eyes, both equally as strong. The constructors title between Mercedes and Red Bull, and they did a really good job of setting that up at the beginning, talking about, you know, Mercedes is the evil empire. They always win. We need to beat them. And then they don't even talk about how Red Bull in their first race showed some weaknesses that they didn't show during practice, specifically with Perez's car turning off and not making it to the grid initially, and then he had to start from the pit lane. And right there, that could have set up the whole rest of the series where you're saying, wow, okay, we thought Red Bull had this, but now Mercedes has a chance, not only in the Constructors, but also in the Drivers' Championship. But Perez, now that he's up there and came all the way from the back to the front, has shown that there is a battle still. Even when there's an issue, the car is so fast, it can make up for it. And they didn't touch on that at all. And I thought that was a massive mistake in terms of telling this like story arc and building people into like what was going on during the year and what was so exciting about it.
They missed the mark on Perez in Bahrain, Verstappen in Baku, and then again with Hamilton in Brazil. Like, those three races to me were, the importance of those were that both teams at times were like down and out in a race and still battled back. Like, at no point this year were either team out of it. And those were kind of like the two evil empires battling against one another, and neither can like fully win, and there's like ups and downs and highs and lows, and as one is succeeding, the other's falling, but then there's like a switch in power. All of that like tension and ups and downs, like as they're going back and forth and across, just that tension wasn't there. It was the tension between Christian and Toto and Christian and Lewis. It was never the tension between constructors and success, which I thought was a miss.
And I guess this brings me to one of my biggest points of contention of the whole season, which is, why are we continuing on this very jumpy pattern to cover the season where you have like a opening episode, and then episode 2, the whole thing is about McLaren and gets to Monaco, and then we're taking a step back in episode 3 to go back to Monaco, and it's just, there's so much jumping around that it makes it very difficult for them to tell this arc. And I think that there were like points within the year to continue to tell the whole story, but still focus on other teams, right? And I guess part of that comes down to who are they following in any given week, and it just kind of like sets them up that way. But they should have enough footage on the track to be able to change the storyline on the fly to make it match what's going on in the season.
Yeah, and I think one of my points of contention was the jumping back and forth and the let's cover Monaco, say certain things about Monaco, and then in the very next episode, they're using the same footage. Like, there's a clip of Daniel Ricciardo getting in the car that they show twice, and I'm like, you couldn't have found any other clip to put there? Like, you've already shown us that, and the words that go with it are just the same. So that was something I struggled with. I noticed they didn't do it as much later in the season, but early in the first couple episodes, I was like, this feels very repetitive, especially with Monaco. And I know that's a point that Megan was frustrated about.
I mean, the footage that I saw way too many times was the Ferrari pit crew stretching in Monaco. I was like, I think we see that footage 3 times. And that's when I was like, and I went back and I made a note about this because as I was taking notes, I was like, there's a lot of these like montages. So in episode 2, we have the like Daniel Ricciardo shit show montage is what I called it, where it was like, and then things got worse here. And then we have the Mercedes montage of things got worse here, and here. And then we have Red Bull had success at here. But they skip so many. I mean, that one of those races that was like a shit show moment for Mercedes was Baku, and all you see is like Lewis Hamilton driving straight. They never acknowledge Verstappen. They never acknowledge Perez. So it felt, you're right, it felt jumpy, and it felt like it jumped over pivotal points, but then extended, like Monaco. I felt like we talked about forever, and I was just like, but like, did Monaco really even matter that much other than like Verstappen winning and leading the points?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, right? And I guess the way that Monaco kind of built into it and the way that they tried to build it into the story was like, this is kind of where Mercedes fell apart. And I guess you could make that argument, right? They didn't have a good run of form after that race, and that's where, Red Bull started to gain their lead until Baku. But isn't there a great story to tell about last year, the focus entire episode on Perez winning his first race and then getting into the Red Bull seat, and now you get to Baku. You can tell the story about how that changed Max's thing, but you can also follow up on a guy that was a pivotal character in the last season and tell the story about how he came to Red Bull and proved that they made the right choice to put him in that second seat. And Perez doesn't even get screen time until the last episode of the season. That was the first time that he got, outside of the first episode, that he got any coverage, that he got any interview, that he got any mention from the team. And again, I think that's unfair to him, but it's also unfair to the fans that want to see some of these details, right? Perez was struggling earlier in the year. What was that looking like for him? We got some great insights about Danny Ricciardo in the second episode struggling, and even other guys throughout the season.
I did make a note that episode 2 should have been Daniel Ricciardo and Perez struggling. It should have been the two of them struggling, because that would have been way more interesting than pairing than Katie and I said this, pitting Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris against each other randomly. In that episode, they make Lando out to be like kind of anti-Danny Rick.
Yeah, I started to jump in, Megan, but I had severe issues with episode 2. Like, I probably was halfway through and I didn't even want to finish it. I really thought about skipping to the next episode because I I really disliked whether this is how it went or whether they're adding extra drama to it. I did not like how they pit the two of them up against each other at all. And I felt like there was a ton of contention with being a young driver and having, the great Daniel Ricciardo join the team and him not doing so well. And the whole thing about like not having sympathy was very interesting, bringing up that article. One thing I noticed, we got a lot of Charlotte. You guys know Charlotte, obviously, in McLaren. We got a ton of content with her and Lando, which I was kind of shocked at.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
I was shocked about Charlotte. Sorry, I'll just add that. I was very shocked about the Charlotte coverage. Okay, your turn, Connor.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked that there was some coverage of a team member that wasn't somebody that you see during the season. That was something that I felt they did a really good job of in season 3, specifically the Ferrari episode, that they didn't really do any of last year, and that was frustrating. What I will say is your idea, pitch that, like call them up and pitch that, of like having all of the drivers that changed teams or all of the new drivers that came in and were struggling, kind of have that be an episode of like the struggles of coming into Formula One, the struggles of a new team, and use that to build that first half of the season. And you can throw some other things into it, but like focus on those drivers and their struggles. And if you need to jump back a little bit, like that's okay. You can do that. You can jump back and go back into like, okay, here's what's going on at the front of the pack. Because that was the beauty of Drive to Survive at the beginning, was the insights that you got to the teams that were struggling, the insights that you got to the teams at the back of the grid. And they were still able to piece in some things with Ferrari and Mercedes, even though neither of those teams were actively participating back in the first season.
The other thing I had about episode 2 is that, one, it should have been either Danny, Rick, and Sergio Perez, or it should have just been a completely Ferrari episode. Because I would have loved more. I mean, we got glimpses of the relationship between Charles and Carlos, and having Charles established at Ferrari, having a long-term contract at Ferrari, having Carlos come in, you get a little bit of Charles Leclerc talking about how it feels to have a driver, an established driver, joining the team, having a good driver. You see glimpses of them battling it out in Jeddah. But we really don't get a lot more. I think we get a little bit of Binotto talking about the fact that Carlos, came in saying he was fast, he was ready to go, he was excited to be in the car, like, let's see what he's got. But we don't get much beyond that. And I would have loved more build up, more of a storyline, because there had to be one of like the two of them and their path this year, because it was back and forth. They were close to each other. They were switching spots back and forth. And ultimately, we end up with Carlos Sainz performing better than Charles Leclerc at the end of the year, holistically, in terms of points. So what does that look like? We saw a little bit of Charles Leclerc in Monaco, but really, that whole weekend and that disaster and how that affected him kind of got brushed under the rug.
Yeah, I struggled with Ferrari. I feel like I didn't really learn much about them this year. And I think like my probably biggest contention point, which of this season, which we'll definitely dive into later, is they just fell flat on all the storylines. I feel like even the great Max versus Lewis fell flat. I walked away from watching it and I was like, I got excited. I'm super excited for the season to start, but it was missing the whole, here's why we're watching it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, in a way, it should have been a flow. Like as you're watching it, if you're a Max fan, you should have been getting excited, then pissed again, then excited, then pissed again. And then like right at the end, you get this like great elation. Whereas like with the Hamilton fans, it should have been the exact opposite. And it would have also been really nice if they would have covered some of the off season of Hamilton basically going radio silent. Was he even coming back? I think it would have been a stronger end to the season instead of Toto saying everybody has a target on their back, to being like a video clip from of just like, you know, like the things with the tweets, right? Just have the Instagram post pop up that's just like Hamilton saying like, I'm back, and then the screen fades to black. And I think that would have been a much stronger end and build into this season. Yes, Netflix, I am looking for a job. Please call me.
Well, okay, so I have a couple of issues. We're going to just jump to episode 10, and then we've got to circle back to a couple episodes. But you brought up the Toto comment, and now I got to talk about it. I got to talk about it because I got a lot of issues with my boy, Toto Wolff. I'm sorry, I've been watching a lot of Elizabeth Holmes coverage, and whoever told Toto Wolff to go full Elizabeth Holmes in that last clip needs to be told that they need to not. Like, we got the black turtleneck, he's gone Steve Jobs, Elizabeth Holmes, like, everybody has a target on their back.
I was getting some like 007 vibes too. I'm like, what are we? The number one assassin? No, you're a team
He
principal.
also has like, he had his one eyebrow up really high, and I was like, I know you're trying to be really scary, Toto, but you are giving some serious Theranos owner vibes right now. And I don't know how I feel about this moment. But also, we know you're pissed. That's my hot take of the entire day. No, I agree with you, though. At the end, it just felt a little bit... Well, first off, I thought that on top of the fact they should have covered Lewis going basically radio silent for 8 weeks, they should have covered the... First off, they should have covered the, 3 days after Abu Dhabi when all of us were in a state of emotional turmoil. And
then the protest. They didn't talk about the protest once. They didn't talk about any of that.
None of the protests.
That's probably the most dramatic moment. The moment that you could sink your teeth into as a not fan of F1 is this was a win for Max, and Mercedes said, no, it's not. We're going to challenge this. And we didn't know for 3 days. Could you imagine if that happened at the Super Bowl? They said, yeah, no, that was not a touchdown at the end of the game. And for 3 days, we didn't know if these teams were going to have to get back on the field and replay the last game, or if they were going to give it to the other team as a win. That's the shit that they could have immediately gone into. And they could have had Will Buxton say exactly that in his wonderful British accent. And it would have been incredible. People would have killed for that.
They should have had a whole episode on post Abu Dhabi instead of a whole episode on Jeddah. I'm sorry. I'm going to say it. Episode 9, a waste of my time.
Or they should have just completely included it in episode 10, because that whole episode 10 did not have to be the final race. You could have spent the first half on the race and then the second half on exactly what you're saying. I was shocked that we did not hear anything about Mercedes coming back and saying that they are not satisfied with how this ended. I feel like that's Netflix just sweeping it under the rug. Let's make a drama out of everything except for arguably the most dramatic point of the whole entire season.
Netflix even teed it up. Teed up Michael Massey being the enemy, because there's that scene in episode 9 where Christian goes up to Michael and basically they have this buddy conversation where they're Christian's do you know anything? And he's I'm going to eat. And he's is that code for something? He's they're still deliberating. And then Michael Massey's it's really hard to be a friend, a policeman, a safety guy. They teed it up and then they didn't do anything with it.
I was blown away when I saw Michael Massey in the interview chair. My jaw dropped. I was because I thought we were going to get him again. I was oh, they interviewed him. I wonder if he's going to have I highly doubted it, but you get to wonder if he was going to come back and speak about the last race.
That would have been amazing. That would have been that insane. Right there. That's $1 million interview right there.
That would have saved the season.
Yeah. 100%.
That would have saved the season. Michael Massey, they set up that entire drama over the last like you could even do, really, you could start at Brazil and set that whole thing up, because we didn't even have anything about any of the penalties in Brazil. Realistically, you could have set up that entire Red Bull, Mercedes, FIA triangle of the Bermuda Triangle of penalties starting in Silverstone.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
And speaking of Silverstone, they kind of did a little bit in episode 3, right? But what, to your point, why did they not build it further? Why did that not then become the arc, the story, the penalty? Everything, Horner mentioned it a bit, but they didn't interview him about it. It was just him complaining about it in the garage after the event happened.
And then so I felt like they did Silverstone a disservice, and then they spent a lot of time on Monza that I felt could have been shortened, and then we could have, if they had set Silverstone up differently, then Monza could have been shorter, and then I don't know. I'm not in charge of production, but I just felt like they spent a lot of time in the wrong spots on the Max and Lewis thing.
Yeah.
I think
Episode 3 had issues, but way less issues than episode 2. And frankly, for me, episode 3 I thought was one of the highlights of the season. I loved the way that they foreshadowed the shitty pit stop for Mercedes at Monaco. The way that they had like the two of them, looking at it, and Horner saying, "Oh, they keep watching us," and then sure enough, had the bad pit stop. But really what was awesome about this one, and what's awesome about Drive to Survive, and what I would love them to focus on going forward, is those inside looks into the thought process of the drivers or the mechanics or the teams throughout the season. The fact that Baku was still on the front of Lewis's mind when we got to Silverstone, which was like, weeks later, that to me was huge, right? He knew he had made a mistake. He knew he was behind. He was feeling the pressure. That's why he said, fuck it. I'm going for this move. I don't care if it takes me out of the race. I need to make something happen. And those insights are what Drive to Survive, to me, is all about, and why we would want to tune into it. And they need more of that.
I'll piggyback off of that. I thought the only real mention of COVID this year was in episode 3, and his talking about how he had a lot of anxiety about the fans at Silverstone and how he didn't want to get close because he's like, I'm scared to get sick again because that can ruin my ability to win this year. And that insight was unexpected, but was the moment where I even wrote a note. I was like, this is why we watch Drive to Survive, because never once last year did I ever have that thought. Like, what happens if Lewis gets COVID again and is out until the last 2 races? And Lewis was thinking that way back at Silverstone.
Yeah.
You were right, though, that those are the moments that we want in Drive to Survive. I don't really know if we want the Ginger Spice moments because she was a lot in episode 3, but whatever. We do want the Roscoe moments. Let's go to episode 4, and I'm going to totally give this one over to Connor to start because it is Haas.
This episode in and of itself made the entire season worth watching. I think that if you were like, I am only going to watch one episode the whole season, this is the one. Realizing now that Mazepin is so much worse than we initially thought. The guy was lost, right? And like, we knew he was struggling. We figured that he maybe wasn't necessarily having the problems, just like communicating with people, right? This guy's 22 years old. This guy drove in Formula 2. He drove in Formula 3. He drove in karting. He was able to get himself up these ranks a little bit with his daddy's money, but also with talent. He won races. You would think that somebody like that coming into Formula 1 would at least have an idea of what they were doing, right? And the clear and blatant differences between his preparedness to be in Formula One and Mick Schumacher's sitting directly across the table from him with just like this stoic look on his face as Mazepin is just like bitching and tearing the team apart. I would be sitting there like, yo, Maz, shut the fuck up. And Mick was just like, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to take this. And when it's my turn, I'm going to give my feedback and I'm going to do what I can to push the team forward.
Megan, are you going to go?
I'm going to let you go because I want to hear your thoughts and then I have a thought.
Yeah. I thought this was, I agree, one of the best episodes, if not the one that I would also suggest for everyone to watch.
It's one of my favorite ever. Like this episode was it. It was it.
Because it showed what was actually going on in the team with the problem driver and the non-problem driver. And I think the thing that blew me away was how disrespectful both Nikita and his father were to the team. I get it. You're coming in, you're paying for everything. You've got the money, you're in charge. But when he was like, yeah, if we can't figure out what's wrong with the car, I'm pulling all the money and we're just going to be done racing. Fuck you.
It's amazing. This is a grown-ass man, and he's like, I'm going to take my toys and go home.
Yes. He's like, if my son can't win, then I'm going to take all my money and leave. And it made me dislike them more than I thought I was capable of disliking that duo.
So, this is my favorite episode of Drive to Survive ever, which for me is pretty amazing because I hate the Mazepins for a lot of reasons. But this is my favorite episode because at its core, this is why people love this sport. So this episode had everything for me. Like it ticked all of the boxes of what a good Drive to Survive episode should have. It had the education because it was all about how a team principal manages having a sponsor who is very actively involved. We get the undercurrent of how dependent teams are on financial sponsorships and on dollars. Like this episode to me was bigger than any of the other like Williams episodes or even really the McLaren's episodes or even the earlier Haas episodes now that I'm thinking about it, about how reliant on money and ingratiating the team, the driver, the team principal has to be into like making essentially like a Russian oligarch happy. I mean, like, what can I do, Mr. Mazepin, to make you happy so that you don't take your money away from us? Like, that side of it was very educational to see, and to see it in, like, a negative light. And in a very honest and blatant light. And then it had the dynamic. It had the Gunther Steiner team principal dynamic of how do I manage team morale, team goals versus the goals of a driver and his father, who is also heavily involved in the team. So it had all of this tension on multiple levels. It had Nikita versus Mick. It had really Dimitri versus Mick. It had the Mazepins versus the team. It had Gunther versus Mazepin. It had Gunther trying to make change. It just had everything for me.
It also had a conspiracy theory thrown in, and that's always a good time.
It did. Who doesn't love a conspiracy?
The only negative in this entire episode is the last like 5 minutes where they try to make this like redeeming character arc story about how like I walked to school one day and I look at the clouds and the clouds in Russia are different. And so I knew I had to come in and get tires. He still fucking finished last.
Correct. That's the only issue with it. But I think that's a bigger indictment of the fact that Netflix does not actually know how to cover Formula One races yet.
My last note for this episode is the only thing he knows is his Russian clouds.
Oh man.
And the clip, it's already all over Twitter, but the clip of when he's like, I don't know how he drives the car. And I'm like, talent. And a good
crazy.
attitude.
Okay, wait. Before we move on, we need to acknowledge the two greatest Gunther Steiner quotes ever. First off is when he was like, "That's why people hate you." I was like laughing so hard. I watched it like 7 times. I was like, "Oh my God." And then the other great Gunther moment was when he was having an interview and he's like, he's not an oligarch, he's a fertilizer guy. And I was like,
that was great. He knew the way that he said that, right? That was like a tongue-in-cheek comment.
I was like,
Yeah.
that aged so poorly, but I just like want to blow that. I want to blow Gunther up saying that comment and just like hang it on the wall. Like,
And I do wish, I talked about this in the preview, I wish they would have added the black screen, white letters, Nikita Mazepin has been removed from the team for 2022. I would have loved that end of the episode. You will no longer see him in Formula One. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
question to both of you, do you think they intentionally did not tell the Mick Schumacher story because Schumacher, the documentary, came out this year, or because they're saving it to tell the story in next season?
I think it's a little of both. I loved the clip of them posing with the furniture that had me honestly on the floor laughing. I don't know why it was so hysterical, but it was. But I think they're saving completely agree. I think it's like, go watch the Schumacher documentary. You get to see a little bit more about Mick and his dad and the legacy. I think it was like the perfect amount, and I'm glad they chose to focus on Nikita because I felt like it was a bigger learning experience versus I think Mick is going to be in F1 for a while, and I could see them covering it, later if it continues.
Yeah. I also think too, like, not to say that Mick is boring, but compared to Mazepin, he's white bread.
It's pretty boring.
Yeah, you're not wrong. He's like the cookie cutter rookie, dad, all-time greatest. He's here. He knows what he's doing. He has his head on straight. There's not much of a storyline there yet.
Yeah.
Yes. I just wonder if they kind of like they kept the race that George Russell deputized for Lewis in.
That was Sakir.
Yes, they kept that in their back pocket from 2020 for 2021. I'm just wondering if they're keeping like Mick in their back pocket to be like kablam for 2022. I don't know. It just seemed weird that I don't know. I just thought there would have been more. I thought they would have used the like last name card a little bit more for some reason. I don't know. Okay, let's go on to number 5, Monza, staying alive.
I was more focused on the fact that Zach Brown plays on the club hockey team. I don't know why, but that was such a character like adjustment for me. Like, I feel like I know the man. He's right here on my wall. And then here he is showing up at his club hockey team. And they included the clip of him tripping.
He gives off such like dad beer league hockey vibes. Like,
That's exactly what that is. I felt like this episode, everything that episode 4 nails, this one just totally misses, right? There was no new insights that we got. And I want to know, right? Why was McLaren just so fast that weekend? What did they do? Did they realize going into Monza, A, that this was even a possibility, or B, like once they got there, oh shit, like we're at the front here. Like we've got a good shot to make this happen. And they didn't talk about any of that, right? They didn't have Seidel on. They didn't ask Zach Brown about that. Like, these are the things that they could have done and made this into a story of like, this should have been the only McLaren episode. Should have been Monza. Do the backtrack. Do the history. Talk about all of this. Talk about the 07 season briefly, and then how they fell down the ladder and haven't won in all of these years, so that this win, why it's such a big deal that they were able to pull this off. And then also, too, like, how did we get there? And then they should have tied it into the next week at Russia, and the fact that they almost fucking pulled it off again. Like, if they had done that, they could have ended it with, like, so things are great at McLaren, but there's still a long way to go for them to get to the top. You know, that kind of story. You're hyped, you're excited about it, but you're also seeing, like, they're not quite there yet.
So what's weird about this is, you're right. There should have been one McLaren episode, because they, again, at the beginning of this episode, they backtrack to Daniel being like all up in his feels in his personal battle. You backtrack to Zach Brown being like, I'm worrying about, should we have signed Daniel? You see a little bit of Andrei Seidel being like, should we have done it? We need to see from him if he was worth signing. Then we get like a snippet of Ferrari, and then it's like straight into Monza, instead of being like, let's just have Ferrari in one episode, McLaren in one episode, and in both of those episodes acknowledge the interaction a little bit, but set up that arc. Like, it just felt very weird to get a little McLaren here and really set up Monza, but have 2 episodes between the two. And really, it almost made the Monza win feel not as exciting as it did in the moment. Like, it didn't do Monza justice. Because in the moment, it was iconic.
I would completely agree with that. I feel like they tried to hype it up by showing the tattoo and tried to make it sound cool and whatever and great, but I was disappointed in the episode. That one was the one I was looking forward to most. That we knew that Netflix was following them that weekend. Daniel told us like exactly after the weekend happened. And so maybe it was just the hype was building up and I was excited to relive that moment, but fell flat.
They also, again, here talked about the sprint race, but didn't actually talk about the sprint race. So we got, again, no genuine coverage of it. Like, hey, it happened. We don't talk about it. Moving on. Like, it just felt very weird. I don't know if that... Yeah.
It's almost as if they gave up on the educational aspect that they wanted to do in season 1. They're like, we don't want to dumb this down. We don't want to be mansplaining or something along those lines. But you kind of should just keep doing that, right? There's so much more to learn about Formula One that even on a broadcast, right? How many times do we hear the same things over and over again? They explain the tires at the beginning of every single race. They explain pit stops. They explain strategy. And that's because every single time you get somebody to tune in, it might be a new person. And they may go ahead and just start on season 4 because they know that season 4 is covering the last season. And one of their friends said, yeah, you gotta watch, you gotta like know what happened last year because that's going to set you up for what's going on this year. And those little bits of education that they have added in previous seasons, they really didn't do a great job of this year. There was 1 or 2 little snippets that were strong, but that is a key one that they missed, and they should have plugged it in the Silverstone episode because they talked about Silverstone, how it was the first thing since COVID and how it was such a big deal. They didn't also mention that it's an extra big deal because there's not just one race this weekend, there's 2 races. And this is a thing that is going to be happening going forward.
One of my biggest disappointments was the lack of education in the season. because you're completely right. There's always more to learn about Formula One, and I don't know if Box to Box Films needs to get like a F1 historian on the team or an F1 expert on the team or what.
Me.
I think
Connor's looking for a job.
Connor needs a job if you didn't know.
I need a job. Hire me.
Because
He's free.
you should be educating these fans whether they've seen seasons 1, 2, and 3 or whether they have not. They should be able to walk away knowing the basics of Formula One. And I feel like, and like, yeah, we're quote unquote, we know a lot more than other people because we spend all of our time researching Formula One. But I felt like I learned nothing from that episode or that season. I feel like I did not learn anything new.
I also just don't think it would have taken away from it at all if they had added that. And also, like, isn't that Will Buxton's job is to sit there and say, like, this year we've added sprint races. Like, here's what a sprint race is. Yeah. Like, isn't that kind of what he's supposed, or him and Jenny Gow are supposed to do?
Yeah. What else does he add, right? Other than like being a voice, a really good like announcer voice to just tell us some things that we need to know.
Connor.
He's there to care. Go ahead, Megan.
Connor, Will Buxton wants to let you know that if you're the fastest car and you cross the line first, then you win the race.
Will Buxton is a pretty boy, but me and him are going to be best friends one day.
I mean,
Coming for you, Will.
I like him, but he likes to say things so dramatically that are just like facts. Like, if you are first, you win the race.
Oh, man.
That is a fact. Thank you for the inflection.
All right, let's talk about episode 6, A Point to Prove, the Williams episode. What are our key takeaways from this episode, Connor?
The key takeaway for me in this is very similar to what we got with the story around Haas, right? Is how much money matters. They got this big new funding group, Dorilton Capital, and they came in and they dove into it a little bit. I would have liked some more, saying we're expecting results and we're expecting them pretty quickly. And so seeing the way that Jost Capito runs an organization with that pressure, and that was really good. That was a really good insight, and I really enjoyed that. What I'm disappointed about is Jost and George had a really good connection and seemed to have a really similar mindset to each other. I would have loved to have seen George and Jost continue to work together to hopefully bring Williams back towards the top of the grid. Obviously, that mindset will work great at Mercedes, but it would have been really cool if the two of them could have stayed together and been the underdogs that come and take down the Goliaths.
This episode, I had a lot of feelings in this episode. I'm glad they did the Williams episode because I felt like they did Williams dirty last season by not giving the family's exit enough attention, due, credit, whatever word you want to attribute to it. So I did really like that. And I loved seeing Claire Williams, and I loved her talking about, you know, I've driven to Williams every day for 18 years, and her driving there and hearing it on the radio. I loved all of that. Jost is an interesting fellow. I'm sorry.
Chaotic.
He is very German, to put it in the words of George Russell. And like, Netflix, did you need to include the story about squeezing balls? Like,
Oh, that was my favorite line of the entire season.
it's just like, I don't really know if I like that. I liked him in a cowboy hat, though. And the best part of that was he's like, we're in America, we're in Texas. Where are we? Austin? I was like, you're literally presenting to your financiers. You don't even know where you are.
Oh, man, that's good.
No, and then, you know, then we have the George Russell scene where his ass is out and he's like a bit Valtteri Bottas with my ass out. And I was like, this episode is chaotic. I don't know what's happening.
The whole episode chaotic, like George crying at the end. I totally forgot that George went P2 in Williams and Spa. Like, I don't know why that slipped out of my brain, but to relive that moment, it just went from emotion to emotion to emotion to emotion to emotion.
I mean, it just was up and down. Like, I was upset about Claire, and then I was like, a ball squeezing, what? And then I was like, sad again. And then there was like a montage, and it was like George Russell's ass. And then I was like, George Russell's crying. I'm like, I was like, the whole episode. Was that the episode that George Russell talks about the underwear with his face on it?
No, it's episode 8. We'll get there.
Oh, we'll get there.
We'll get there. First,
okay.
First, we have to talk about the Yuki debacle in episode 7.
The other chaotic episode that gave me anxiety.
His apartment gave me anxiety. Even though my apartment sometimes looks like that, it gave me anxiety. And my favorite line, I've said this to Megan, I think like 3 times now already, but he said, if I train in the morning, it ruins my whole day, because he hates training. And like the biggest part about being an F1 driver, as that is your job, is to train and to prepare, and he hates it.
Oh my God.
Him saying my muscles hurt and I'm sweaty. I was like, Yuki, I feel like that every time I go to the gym.
It's amazing to me that somebody can be that lazy and also that fucking talented. This guy, that was the key takeaway that I had from this is I understand why Red Bull is so into this kid, because if they can get him to even put in, 50% more effort than he does right now, holy shit.
He'll be
holy
fast.
Shit. Yeah. And that is the key thing with him, is that he is as fast as he is, fast enough to finish top 6 in Formula One a couple times this season, but he won't even wake up in the morning and go for a run.
Because it makes him sweaty, Connor. Duh.
It ruins his whole day.
His whole day. But I feel that in the end will be his downfall, right? If he doesn't figure that out this year, they'll let him go and he'll never get another opportunity anywhere because of this episode, because people know that he isn't going to work hard. If he doesn't improve this year, that is the label that's going to be stuck with him. So I hope for Yuki's sake that he can figure it out. Otherwise, his motorsport career might be over about as quickly as it started.
Okay, so the training, massive issue. But the other thing that was really annoying is, so they send him to Italy. They're like, okay, you're leaving the most boring place on earth, Milton Keynes. I can attest, most boring place on earth. Been there, boring as shit. Food's horrible. British food can sometimes be good. Milton Keynes, nothing good there. They send him to Italy. So he's in Italy, right? They send him to start going to the factory to learn. And he's just yawning through meetings. Just yawning. Constantly yawning. And I would have been like, bro, you are making a lot of money. You are literally living your dream. Living in Italy. We got you out of the most boring place on earth. You're just going to yawn?
Show a little interest.
He's not interested. I don't know. And Franz Tost said it best. He said Yuki really needs to work hard to stay in Formula One. And he does. He has talent, but talent only gets you so far, because there's a lot of talented drivers who are willing to work.
Yeah.
I thought the other really weird... Sorry, Connor, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say the other really weird thing about this episode was how they just tried to sneak Alpine and Ocon in there. I didn't like that pairing at all. It made no sense.
Our brains are on the same wavelength, and this goes back to what we said earlier. If they're gonna do storylines like this, where they're talking about, how can you talk about like a rookie struggling and then be talking about like Ocon? It would have made more sense to have like Danny Rick and Ocon in the same episode to show like they struggled and then they both got through it and got a win. It would have made more sense to have Mazepin and Yuki in the same episode to show, wow, okay, these rookies struggled, but it was kind of their fault. And they could have put Mick up there as like the epitome of what a rookie should do and why he had been doing so much better than them. And these are like not difficult storylines to come up with.
I feel like these are kind of like what I would call like given storylines. Like, no offense, like you know what I'm saying? Like, these are things like none of us are producers, but these are just like common sense things. The pairing of the two is weird. I don't know if it's because the two of them are kind of like quirky that they thought it would work. I don't know if they were trying to go from the like AlphaTauri Alpine going for fifth in the constructors, but that storyline is like storyline F in that episode if you really think about everything that's going on. And they try to make that storyline more apparent by having like Franz Tost and Laurent Rossi on there, but their episodes their interviews are just, it's not enough. Like, if this episode was supposed to be like Alpine versus AlphaTauri, then we should have seen Pierre Gasly and we should have seen Fernando Alonso in there, and we should have seen a lot more of Pierre Gasly like success and, Fernando Alonso's success and Fernando Alonso's struggle. There was no clear vision. I don't think they knew what storyline they were going for in this episode.
Yeah. And, the only reason why I think this was a strong episode, relatively speaking, is because of what we learned about Yuki. The rest of it was like, it was so close to almost being on that level of a Haas episode if they had just kind of figured out the storyline a little bit.
I feel like it just wouldn't have taken that much and it could have been just as good as Haas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, basically wouldn't have really required anything, just maybe like moving some clips around.
Yeah.
Netflix, if you got another job, I'll take that too.
All right. Episode 8?
Let's do it. Second Mark.
Let's do it. I think it should have been called George Has a Girlfriend.
I posted this on my Instagram page yesterday, Katie.
Is that where Absolutely. I saw that, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know.
It might have been, honestly. Like, cool. Congratulations to him on having a girlfriend.
Yeah, this whole thing, genuinely, I feel like his team went to Netflix and said, hey, Mazepin insinuated that George was gay. We need to prove that that is not true.
I didn't think about that.
I mean, it just feels like a little too much. I understand Jerry Horner and Susie Wolf being a part of it. I am trying to understand why I find Jerry Horner to be the most annoying character this season, and I quite enjoy Susie Wolf's interviews. I think there's too many, but I quite enjoy them. But the girlfriend of George Russell being on there and being so present just felt odd. I would have, absent Max Verstappen, like if Max had been more present this season and been interviewing, it would have made a lot more sense for Kelly Paquette to been there, or PK to be in there. But like George's girlfriend and having that much time.
Also, they were going to get a cup of coffee. It would have been different if she was like in the paddock and like part of a conversation or something, but it's just a clip of them going to get coffee. Like, that's not giving me anything about George Russell off track as an F1 driver. That's giving me George Russell a human.
Again, I seriously think that George's PR team went to Netflix and said, this is what we want this episode to be. If you don't do this, we don't give you George.
I mean, I hadn't really thought of that, but it does feel very out of place. I'll say that. It feels very random. Especially because he's really the only driver to have the girlfriend present off track that heavily. I mean, we see Valtteri's girlfriend, but that's more in the context, that's all on track, and she isn't like the focal point. She's present and he's talking to her, but it doesn't feel artificial.
They don't introduce her. Like, they put her name on the screen and that was it. It wasn't like this whole thing about like, I have a girlfriend, here's who she is.
Yeah, it felt weird. What are our thoughts about the staged like secret Toto George Russell in like the random corner of the paddock being like,
okay,
bad news, you're going to be with Lewis.
I spent a good, I rewinded this 6 times. I'm trying to figure out what track they were at because I'm pretty sure that was not Spa. I believe it was not Spa where that was filmed. I think they filmed that somewhere else and then just did it in a way that they kind of like covered up where it was. But the color of the seats don't line up with the color of the seats at Spa.
I'm going down a rabbit hole today.
Yeah, I need to put my investigator hat on.
There goes my entire afternoon. We will circle back. In the words of corporate America, we're going to circle back on this one and discuss our findings.
I think my favorite part of that whole interaction was not only did Toto have the 007 moment this season, but he had the Godfather moment. And when he says, finally, you've come. Like, finally, you've come to me.
Oh, my God. On the day of my daughter's wedding.
I did love the scene, like I will say this flashback was great, where it's Toto and Susie, and we know that Jack Wolf is in the backseat with Susie, and James calls Toto, and he's like, "Hi, Toto," and it was like the "Hi, Valtteri, this is James" moment, but it was like James calling Toto about inverting the cars, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, James calls Toto and does the same thing that he does to the drivers."
Hey, guy has a way that he talks, right?
I just thought it was amazing. I was like, that little, like, that nugget right there. I was like, oh, again, another moment of why we like Drive to Survive, because it's those clips that offer insight into the Mercedes team. Because I always kind of just thought those messages to Valtteri were James kind of being an asshole. I think that's just how he talks. Connor, Katie and I have talked about this a lot. You haven't mentioned anything about it. What are your thoughts on the presence of both Ginger Spice and Susie Wolf?
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows a shift in what they were trying to get out of Drive to Survive, right? It's really become more of the Toto and Christian show. And so bringing them on really for me is just an indication of that, and that the team principals now, especially those two, are almost becoming more important characters than the drivers. And I think that throughout the season that was the case, right? Even in the episodes that were like supposed to be focused on the drivers, unlike the years where they introduced us to Danny Ricciardo and they like followed him around and showed him not just like at the track and racing, but like what he does in his spare time. They didn't really do any of that this year. But they did show that with the team principals. And here is my favorite snippet from the entire season. There is a time where Jerry Horner and Christian Horner are on a horse. And they're talking.
You brought it up. Oh my God, it's going to happen.
They're on a horse, and they're talking, and Jerry Horner laughs. And the laugh is the same laugh as the beginning of Wannabe by the Spice Girls.
I'm going to have to, that's another investigator hat on that I'm going to have to do some research about.
And the whole time, I thought the laugh at the beginning of that was Scary Spice, and it turns out it was Ginger Spice, and I have been lied to my entire life. I'm not here for
truth,
this.
the truth comes out.
Okay, so gonna say, I thought you were gonna talk about that scene, but talk about the fact that she said that she thought the horse that Christian was riding was a Botas. And Christian was like, I don't ride Valtteri. I thought that's what... But then
No. Sorry, I'm less interesting than that. I'm way more interested in the Spice Girls.
Oh my gosh. I will have to go back and listen to that song now and compare the laughs, because I guess I never really thought about.
It's that moment that you're talking about when she laughs in response. It's the same laugh.
Oh my goodness.
I wish I could play the song right now, but I don't think you guys would be able to hear it. So we'll work on that.
I wonder if there's a way of figuring out who, like, to confirm that it was her or not. Like a quick Google search if we could figure out if it was her laugh or not.
To the interwebs.
To the interwebs we go.
I do want to say one thing about the Susie Wolf, Jerry Horner thing. And I asked Megan, I confirmed if it was a dirty take. She kind of already mentioned it, but Susie Wolf had so much airtime. Respect her. I think she offers a great perspective, but all the airtime that was spent on those wonderful women could have been spent on Sebastian Vettel, more Checo, Aston Martin, more Pierre. Any mention of Kimi Räikkönen retiring? I felt like we just missed out on a lot of things and were given the wives of Formula One instead.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys, I've gone down a really interesting wormhole here. Apparently, for years, it has been told that Mel B is the one that was doing the laugh. And recently, Mel C came out and said, no, it's actually Jerry who does the laugh. And it became a national outrage in the UK. And Drive to Survive just confirmed that Mel C is correct, and now the UK needs to apologize right now.
You heard it here first on Dirty Drive. Breaking news. We have just confirmed it was Jerry who laughed at the beginning. We're here for all of your content needs.
You wanted me on here, and I'm just going to take us on tangents. Sorry, guys.
I love it. I'm so glad we cleared up this confusion. And more importantly, to the entire country of the United Kingdom, you are welcome. Well, to the entire multiple countries of the United Kingdom, you are welcome.
You're welcome.
We accept all donations. And if any of you know anyone at Netflix, Connor and I would like jobs.
Big time.
Katie, you're right, though. To go back to what you were saying, you are completely right. I think there was some massive time allocation issues. I think there is definitely a time and a place, a role for both of them to play. I did love a lot of Susie Wolf's interviews because she comes from a background of motorsports, so hers felt, to me, a little bit more insightful. They also felt a little bit more like worthy of the time. Not saying anything against Ginger Spice, but she's part of the sport. It makes sense. She's a managing partner at Mercedes. She's a CEO of Venturi Racing. Like, it kind of makes sense why she was interviewed. A lot of the Jerry Horner stuff, I was kind of like, look, this is great background on Christian. It's cool to see him being a normal human around his children. I think it is weird that he tried to make his children's wish into the dandelion about Max. Like, let them wish for what they want. I'm not a parent. Guess I can't judge other parenting styles. Yeah, but it felt like there could have been some time allocation. More importantly, Netflix, like, where's my shit about Kimmy leaving? Where's my Kimmy and Gio episode?
They didn't mention Alpha once.
They didn't even really mention that's where Valtteri was going. Did you notice that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They didn't mention it once.
Did Alfa Romeo not want to be a part?
That's what I'm saying. I wonder if they opted out for some reason.
Or if they are saving it in the back pocket for the big move. And next year, because they're going to have to cover Zhao and being the first Chinese driver. So that could be another back pocket move for season 5.
Yeah. But you know what? It would be nice if they did some stuff that wasn't just covering last season, but like it was also going to tee up this year.
Yeah,
right?
like a look to the future.
Yeah, because especially for somebody that like is getting into Formula One and they want to feel like, all right, I want to be up to speed. I'm going to watch this season. They didn't do a great job of talking about next year. And it would be nice if like the last episode, even if they just want to dedicate the last episode of a season to be like, here's what's changing for next year, but obviously done in a way more interesting, dramatic way than just like, here's what's changing for next year.
Do you think the whole Andretti Sauber deal is why Alpha wasn't featured if Netflix wasn't allowed to follow Alpha because of the talks?
You know, that's an interesting conversation of that's a really interesting point, and I hadn't thought about that. I don't know. It really would all come down to like, were they planning to interview them in like the US, right? And that was the weekend that all of this stuff was going down, and they basically just said like, there's too much going on right now, we can't participate. Or if they just didn't feel that there was a storyline there that was worth telling. Again, I think that's kind of sad that we didn't get Kimi at all, right? There was nothing. There was no interview with him. There was nothing with Kimi, and maybe Kimi did opt out. You know, that's entirely possible. But you know, this show is called Drive to Survive. 2 drivers from that team did not survive, and they didn't tell us why they didn't survive. Get back to your mission statement.
And that should be the frame of that should be the perspective that they're taking on all of the drivers. Like, what is a driver doing or not doing to survive in the world of F1? Like, that should be the lens in which they view all of the episodes and all of the storylines and the arcs. Like, what is Max, Lewis, Nikita, Mick, anybody doing to either keep their spot or lose their spot? And I feel like they've drifted away from that because that's how I felt like season 1 was really set up. Every episode was like, what is X person, X team, X principal doing to either maintain their place, increase their position, fix their fall? All of these questions, that all has gotten muddled, and now it's focused on, I mean, it just seems like it's focused on like different storylines. I don't know, it's gotten away from it.
I feel like they focused a lot more on their favorite drivers and their personalities versus, again, telling the story of what they're doing to prepare, why they're in this sport, how they're doing, the pitfalls, the greatness. And maybe that's the reason why we liked the Haas episode so much. And I did enjoy the Yuki coverage because I felt like I was getting to know the driver. Someone walked away, I saw it on Twitter, they were like, how am I supposed to know what team I want to be a fan of? How am I supposed to know what driver I want to be a fan of if I feel like I haven't gotten to know them as a driver and as a team?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that is the key thing, right? That I think got people into Drive to Survive, and I think that's the key thing that this season really missed is they were almost like afraid. It almost seems like there was multiple people pulling them in different directions, right? Like they were afraid to go away from that, but they felt that they had to tell the story of the season because this season was just so incredible. And instead of, you know, doing both effectively, they did neither effectively. And I would have almost rather if they had just gone fully in one direction and given me like a great, insane recap of the season, or just given me like the storylines of the drivers and the teams and like why you should root for them.
I think Netflix was kind of like fucked going into this, truthfully. Like, I mean, I there was no genuine way to be able to get everything in that happened last year into 10 episodes. But I think they did a really...
Do 20.
Well, exactly. Do more. But I also just don't actually think they thought about what they were doing. and we're like, what
Yeah.
do we actually want people to walk away from this 10 episodes with? Because I'm not sure
Yeah.
what I walked away with. Okay, should we get into 9 and 10 so that we can get to the like spicy future of Drive to Survive questions? Should we just talk about 9 and 10 together, we think?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
I-
so.
I don't really have much to add about these episodes. To me, and my brother said this, it felt like a highlight reel. It just felt like you were watching like the F1 highlight videos that they put up after the races. There was really no new information. I understand that not having Max in the season really hurt getting some of that insight, but there was more stuff they could have interviewed Lewis about. They didn't. There was more stuff that they could have interviewed Michael Massey about that they didn't. There was more stuff that they could have, brought the other drivers in and gotten the other drivers' perspective on what happened over the last, 3 or 4 races. And they just didn't do any of it. And to me, the last 2 episodes just felt like mailed in.
There was so much content that we got after Abu Dhabi. I mean, so many radio messages, so many pictures, so many articles, so many people commenting on what happened, so many people looking at it from different perspectives. There was so much, just like the depth of shit out there, whether it was controversial, not controversial, so many different ways of looking at Abu Dhabi that they could have done, and they chose a highlight. Just walking us through what happened. I thought that 9 and 10, because they kept them from the media, were going to be these like controversial like episodes where they were going to be like, and this person thought this and that person thought that and this happened. And I thought it was going to be like really like playing the radio messages, even playing like the Danny Ricciardo radio message where he said like he was like watching it happen. I thought it was going to be even the Lewis radio message where like this has been manipulated. I thought it was going to be much more about the fallout and not about, so this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then that happened. Because we all lived it and suffered through it. 9 and 10 felt like just opening up a wound that had barely been healed.
I think Netflix played the safe route with the last 2 episodes, and I see why they kept them from the media, because they are the reason why I gave this season such a low score out of 10.
Yeah.
I was really disappointed in the last 2 episodes.
I was really excited for him too. Okay, Katie, you said it. You gave him a low rating. What's your rating?
I'm giving it a 4.7 out of 10.
Oh, okay. Connor?
I'm giving it a 6, and I'm only giving it a 6 because of the episode with Haas, the Yuki stuff, and the fact that it's Formula One content on Netflix that people are watching. And I know that's really not a good excuse to give it a 6, and it probably should get like a 3, but I really like that Haas episode. I will watch that again and again and again. That was incredible. And I want to continue to drive home that point so that Drive to Survive does more content like that. If you're not going to tell a good story about how the season went from beginning to end, do that.
I am going so middle of the road with this. Like I'm giving it like 3 out of 5 stars because I just felt like this was such like a just like middle of the road, like such a mediocre meh season. Like there were some episodes like episode 2 I will never watch again. That will be the episode I put on to fall asleep because Drive to Survive puts me to sleep. Like whatever. But episode 4 I will watch again. I will definitely probably watch the Yuki one again to try to understand that child, that person again. There were some moments in here that were great, but there were a lot of moments where I was like, this is just falling flat. And so it just really is like so just like middle of the road for me. Like, meh was my reaction at the end. But I do genuinely hope that this continues getting people engaged in F1. So I will continue to be a supporter of Drive to Survive, because the more people that watch it, the more people that get engaged with the sport. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's good. I don't know. Maybe that's a cop-out.
I think I really just wanted more. You queued us up with 3 pretty great seasons. Like, even the COVID season 3 was really well done. And it fell short. You played it safe. It was confusing. And so I'm going to give it a rewatch. I'm going to rewatch the whole thing from start to end this week and see if my score changes. Looking at it a second time, maybe I'm not as excited to watch this, but I want to continue analyzing what they can do better in the future, because it needs to be better next year to continue.
Do you think that like the root cause of the problem was like the focus on the Max Lewis title fight, or is it something else?
Lack of storylines, lack of education, overall confusing. Timeline was kind of interesting. And I feel like they could have spent more time, maybe if the season was longer, talking about more of the races. We glimpsed over quite a few and just talked about, a couple little things from each one. I would have loved to see more Mexico. I would have loved a whole episode just on Brazil. That was like the biggest shortcoming. And I thought we were going to get a little bit with that like little interview with Lewis. And then they quickly changed the subject and started talking about how it must suck that he is the target and everyone is always watching him and the cameras are always in his face. I thought we were going to like circle back to talking more about his season and that great comeback, and that probably one of the best drives I'm going to speak for all of us, one of the best drives we've all ever seen.
Yeah, it didn't pass the sniff test in terms of like where they built up the story. You think back to the season and what are the points that we remember, right? We were in a group chat and 3 of us were talking literally for hours the weekend of Brazil. The Abu Dhabi race at the end went on forever. The Saudi Arabia race, it didn't really have a whole lot of time to fester because we had the season finale the next week, but that was a big, point. And they did have episodes that focused on those 2 races, and yet somehow they were less dramatic than what actually happened on the track. There were areas that they could have skipped over a lot more that they didn't. And I think that it almost would have been more successful if they took Drive to Survive, did a spin-off, which was the coverage of the season and the battle between Lewis and Mercedes and Red Bull and Max, and then done their traditional Drive to Survive where they just focused on the people, the teams, the personalities. And I think that would have been a stronger way of doing this. Focus on Red Bull in the first episode and then Mercedes in the last episode. And like, there's so many ways they could have done this. There's so many potential avenues. How they got to where they did, I don't know.
I mean, half the episodes are Red Bull or Mercedes episodes. And so I kind of just wish they would have, had 10 normal episodes like we've traditionally had with Drive to Survive, and then had 2 1 hour and 15-minute episodes that cover the title fight. A Red Bull one, a Mercedes one. I don't care who you start with. I don't care who you end with, because I think it works either way. And separate them out and just admit that, 2021 was too much to have only 10 episodes. And I think no one would have faulted them for that. And really, Netflix of numbers suffered. And you can't tell me that Netflix doesn't have the money for the 12 episodes. Like, come on. Like, they won't release their numbers on Drive to Survive, but they have to be insane. And these numbers are going to probably be the most watched season. All those people on Twitter who are like, I'm not watching this season of Drive to Survive, like, shut up, you're going to watch it. You're going to hate watch it. We all know you're hate watching it right now. So, like, stop. It just seems weird this season. And it really feels like they did some teams dirty. They did a massive disservice to some of the teams. And at no, like, benefit to elevating the Max Lewis story. Because it just falls flat. Final thoughts. Anyone? Comments?
It got me excited for this season. It really, truly did. Because there's so much, everything is different this season, and I just fucking love this sport. It reminds me how much I love it.
Hey, everyone has targets on their backs this year. Toto told us. I mean, Elizabeth Holmes told us. Oh, goodness. Any
Connor,
final
any
thoughts?
last words?
I think that it's almost a good thing in a way that it fell on its face on such a pivotal time, because now this is either going to lead to them saying, like, all right, we need to make a change. We need to do things differently this coming season. That could potentially lead us to having, an even better Drive to Survive, or, something else to replace it in terms of other content. That's all I can really hope for at this point. Because I think another season like that, people will tune out. Maybe not from F1, but definitely from Drive to Survive. And I could see Formula One after this season being like, yeah, this missed the mark. We need something better.
Need something a touch more engaging, maybe something educational, and maybe a different format, whatever that new format might look like.
Yeah.
I
mean, look, it would be really cool if they had something that was more of like a weekly thing, right? If they're going to do Drive to Survive at the end of the year, make that like your big moments, but then like during the season, you can do those, you can do season updates, or you can do, behind the scenes looks at things, things like drivers meetings and stuff that like we don't get to see. Like, cover that and give us that content every week. And if they're not going to do it, F1 should do it.
F1 should do it. Like, give us more content. It's clear that this is what, like, Drive to Survive found success because people want more. Like, they want the in the garage access. They want the conversations. They want the drivers meetings. I mean, the press conferences I don't care about. Like, they're so staged. But give us the snarky comments, the paddock walks. Like, give us the real stuff, and like let people feel like they're a part of it more than just what we have now, in season at least. I don't know how Formula One does that, but they've got to find a way.
Well, I think that's a wrap on our Drive to Survive review. Please let us know what you think of it. Please let us know if you agree, disagree, completely loved it, and we're all in the wrong. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And we'll have one more special episode. We're going to go through all of the teams and drivers and decide whether they are hot or not for this upcoming season. Connor, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me again. This has been a lot of fun.
And we will see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us at Dirty Driving Pod on Twitter and Instagram.
Until next time, stay dirty.